Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to helping business owners prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your terms. This is the Exit Insights podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates Brownsword, and today I'm talking to DC Palter. Hey, welcome DC, and thanks for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, likewise. You've got a fantastic story. Well, several fantastic stories to tell, really. So, look, why don't you start? Just give us a little bit of an introduction, a bit of background, and I'll jump right in straight after that. And I want to dig into your actual exits. So you've got some great experience to share.
Sounds good. Right. So I'll keep it really short. I started off as an engineer, worked in the steel production industry, went back and got my MBA to go into the marketing side. Ended up at a startup in IT and have been in IT startups for the past 25 years with a couple of exits along the way.
It's not a typical journey for an engineer to end up as an entrepreneur, is it?
Well, I'm seeing more and more of it. When I started, it was kind of rare. Nowadays, if you look at the MBA schools, you look at the startups that I work with, especially with big challenges in places like climate change. I'm seeing more and more engineers who are focused on, instead of joining a big company, saying, I've developed a new technology, I want to bring this to market myself as a new product. So we're seeing a lot of startups in the Silicon Valley community that are really engineering focused, because that's where the biggest challenges are. So it's changed.
Things do change. So DC, I think you've got a couple of exits under your belt, and one of the things you're sharing with me is going through those exits. I guess they're never really as they seem. So what happened with the first exit? You were sharing.
So I brought a couple of props with me. So I got my tombstone from the first exit here, and I got my tombstone from the second exit here, and the tombstone from the second exit is bigger than the first one. So maybe that means something. The first one is quite a while ago, but it was an IT products company, made network accelerators, was acquired by a partner that was looking to integrate our technology into their technology. So it's kind of your typical strategic partner sort of acquisition. And I think the problems that cropped out of it were pretty typical of the sorts of things you see with strategic partner acquisitions. They were roughly 50 times bigger than we were. And so their attitude was, great, we want to add your product into our portfolio. We'll buy the company. It's not a big deal to us. Here's some money. And then they said, okay, now go sell. Except they took away all of our sales channels because that competed with their channels. But we couldn't sell through their salespeople because they didn't have a quota for us, so they weren't going to spend any time on it. Basically, it came down to they were the big guys, we were the little guys. They were smarter than us because they were bigger than us. They looked at us as being an unsuccessful startup because we were small and they were big. So they got to set all the rules, even though they didn't understand our market niche. And they gradually destroyed the business. And I think we see that happening over and over with strategic partnerships, that they just didn't give it enough thought, right? Because it was just, they were 50 times bigger. They're like, yeah, it's one little thing. It's not worth the time for the executives to really kind of figure out how to make it work. So they didn't. And a sad story, very frustrating, but not unusual in any way, I think.
So, no, it's not unusual, that's for sure. And I guess if I'm reading between the lines, it sounds like the acquisition, because it wasn't significant in the size or the scale of things for them, they really didn't have too much invested in it. And so therefore they didn't plan it. There was no real strategy. There was no alignment or no plan to make it succeed or make the integration
succeed. None at all. Yes. And I knew that going in, which was really frustrating for me because I was kind of the point person for the deal and I was against the deal. I saw disaster coming. But the other people, especially the original founders, really wanted to, the money was attractive especially for them. And they wanted out, and they got money, so it worked out well for them. But I kind of knew it wasn't going to work out because we just, even during the negotiations, we weren't getting the attention to the deal that was needed. they were very much, here's our terms, take it or leave it for everything, without really kind of considering the situation. But their attitude is, well, we're big and we can't make exceptions because then we have to make exceptions for everyone. And we're like, but we're in a little bit of a different business and there's some special circumstances. And we're like, yeah, well, take it or leave it. So I knew from the beginning that it was not looking promising. And the whole deal negotiations were frustrating, and I kind of saw what was coming. So, it was an exit. It was good for some of the people, but for other people, it was very frustrating.
So, okay. So, and because of their size and their scale, and they're effectively bullying you guys, pushing you around, calling the shots, and as you said, take it or leave it attitude.
Yeah.
But it sounds like so how many shareholders were in your business?
There were 7.
7?
Plus, yeah. So there were 7. There were 2 original owners plus 5 other people, including myself, that came on later and had and went through a reorganization, had significant shareholdings, and then the other employees had options to some extent. So everybody had something invested in. I mean, a small organization had something invested in the exit.
Okay, so. And you mentioned that it was worthwhile. The exit was worthwhile for some, and not so much
Yes.
for others. So I'm taking it.
Yeah.
Not everyone was aligned.
Yeah, and in particular, it was really tough on me because I was the head of sales and marketing, and as part of the deal, we all had a non-compete. So for the engineers, if they stayed, great. If they didn't, it was easy to find another, development job. But in my position, where I was kind of the face of the company to the outside world, I was heavily invested in the particular industry and the trade shows and the relationships and the people. A non-compete meant that I really didn't have any other options. And so that made it the most challenging for me.
Yeah. So you got a non-compete. You've got all of your career, your reputation, your
I had 10 years kind of invested in building the business and building our reputation in that business, and I really didn't have anywhere else to go after that.
And so the exit for you sounds like it wasn't substantial enough for you to not work again,
Right.
but maybe buy a bit of time.
Yeah, so I sound like I'm complaining, but in the end, it worked out, as these things often do, that it was enough that I could then build my own startup, which is, I didn't have to go out to investors. I didn't have to beg and scrimp. I could work for 2 years essentially on no salary, and be able to invest in building a new business. And that's what we did. And that turned out to be a much bigger success for me personally. So in the end, it worked out great. It kind of pushed me into doing something that I might not have done otherwise, that ended up I really enjoyed, and turned into a financial success as well. So that ended up being the stepping stone to the next step in my career. So the first exit, I wasn't the founder, so the financial rewards were substantial. They just weren't, like I said, they weren't enough to retire on. So it did push me into creating my own startup afterwards.
Okay, so before we go on to your next startup, given that we're exploring the learnings, and so that other founders and people considering an exit can learn,
right?
What are the learnings from that first one from you? If you were to go through that, if you were in that situation again, what would you do different, or what would you advise other shareholders who are minor shareholders perhaps about to go through an exit, what they could do or learn from your experience?
Yeah, so if I had it to do over and it was my decision what to do instead of selling the company at that point, I would have, and this is all with hindsight, right? And where the industry went, and it wasn't obvious at the time, but with hindsight, I would have gone off and gotten venture capital and grown that business to be 10 times, 100 times bigger than it was, and that opportunity was there. And somebody else went ahead and did that. So, that was kind of regretful. We were hoping that our partner would do this, but and I see this a lot of times with acquisitions. there's this idea of this bigger company is going to acquire you. They're going to take the product, they're going to put it into their channels, they're going to give you the opportunity that would be difficult for you to do yourself. And so it kind of feels like, okay, now I've got the money behind me, I can do what I wanted to do. But you find out, yes, you've got their money behind you, but you're going to do what they want you to do, not what you want to do. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So really go into it with your eyes open of, especially if there's earnouts involved, how much control are you going to have over those earnouts? Are they going to take away your sales channel, in which case you're not going to make your earnouts? Are you going to be moved? Yeah. So, and if your goal is really to build out the product and make it what you want it to be, I think you need to make sure you're really in strategic alignment with the management of the company that's acquiring you. And also keep in mind that that company, over the course of the next 2 to 5 years, may go through their own challenges and decide, we're going to lay off all the people that we acquired in these little things that aren't core to our business, because that happens a lot too. So just because you're in complete alignment with the current management doesn't mean you're going to be in complete alignment with the new management a year from now.
Yeah, look, the point is, if you don't own the business, you've lost control.
Yes.
And by the sounds of it, if we're applying the learnings, if we went down the VC route, I guess if there are a couple of people who were really keen to exit at some point, as part of a VC deal, you could clean up the shareholding and ensure those who are aligned to the strategy, the crank it up strategy. You've got an aligned leadership and management team all driving for that same next goal.
Well, that sounds easy, but the VCs don't like that, right? They don't want key people leaving, and they definitely don't want key people taking their money to leave. You might be able to let them go and they stay on as advisors and they keep their shares, but being able to have an exit themselves without the company exiting is kind of the opposite of the whole VC philosophy. Works well with private equity though. So private equity guys are very happy to do that. So if you're in the growth stage and can bring in private equity, then they want to work with you on that. They're like, okay, I mean, this is kind of how private equity works of, yes, we have a successful business already. And if we give them another $10 million, $20 million, we can grow it to $100 million business. And there's, 1 or 2 key people who want to retire. So we want to replace them. We'll bring in our people. We'll kind of take the company to the next level. So that's the way the private equity people think. And that may be a good fit. We weren't quite to that stage yet. Whereas the VCs are like, no, we're going to give you $1 million and you're going to grow it to $100 million. And we're not giving you very much, so you better not be taking it out for anything. You can't repay loans. You can't give money to founders. You can't even give yourself a good salary. The idea is to scrimp and save and get yourself up to the next level where the company is worth, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they make a huge profit.
Okay, so we've gone, in hindsight, we could have explored our options a bit more, done some more work with the leadership team, got everyone aligned to a strategy, and ideally have done this work before we went to market, or so we knew in advance if anyone did come on knocking on our door unexpectedly, we would know how we would react. And even with the best laid plans, sometimes an offer comes through that just totally catches you off guard, and it's just too good to do anything with. And
yes, absolutely. And no matter how good your plans are beforehand, reality always catches you unaware. So you got to be able to adjust quickly.
Totally. But without a plan, you're left navel gazing anyway. Okay, so you've exited this business. It wasn't how you would have loved it to have been. It set you up for a little bit, but there was some exclusions there and some constraints. So you're now forced to change careers and look at new options.
Yep.
What did you do? You started a new startup yourself, got it up and running. Looked pretty good. You were in total control this time.
So there were actually 2 of us. So the 2 of us were in total control. But that sets up some other issues when you have everything being 50-50. It's very much like a marriage, right? So that's kind of the challenge of a 50-50 partnership where both parties have to agree on everything, which we usually did. so it worked out really well, but not always.
Okay. So
And when you
you've
don't, there's nothing to do other than argue about it until you do come to some compromise.
yeah, you need some sort of framework for agreement, don't you? Okay,
Yep,
so you're in your second business now. This time you're the founding shareholder as opposed to the new kid
right.
on the block, so to speak.
Yep.
Was there anything that you consciously did when setting up this new company with your partner, knowing that you're now a founder as opposed to a secondary shareholder, that you applied from your learnings from the previous business?
Well, so both of us came out of the previous company, and we were both kind of frustrated with what had happened there. So we were very conscious about kind of what rules we were going to set and what sort of limitations we were going to put in place for non-competes if that ever came up. So we did a lot of, I mean, the previous company, the first company, did a fantastic job kind of bootstrapping itself into being a successful business, and we replicated that. So
Good.
95% of what we did, we just replicated what we had done before.
So that was good.
And then there was just the 5% that we didn't like, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to do that differently. And so we ended up with this really kind of the biggest thing was we kind of thought through, and I recommend everybody do this, especially when you have two shareholders, two 50-50 shareholders. What happens if one of us gets hit by the proverbial bus?
Yep.
Okay, and I think a lot of people don't figure that out. And you know, my partner was responsible for the product development. I was responsible for the business side development, but we made sure at all times there was either of us could take over for the other. But we also had to think through, what happens if one of us can't work anymore, or is incapacitated, or killed, or there's always a case of divorce. What happens now in California if I'm a 50% shareholder and I get divorced? Now you have my ex-wife becomes a 25% shareholder with my 25%. So you have to set special rules and get the spouses to agree to them as well, that they get the money, but they don't get the shares. And so we had to think through all of these issues and what would happen and what would be the valuation of the business if one of the partners had to buy out the other. We ended up, since we're both engineers, with this really complicated algorithm that involved game theory, and one side will put an offer on the table and the other side can either accept it or reject it. In which case, if they so it was really complicated. It's probably too complicated, but it gave us a framework to work from that we were happy with. That ended up never actually getting used, fortunately, but it was there.
It sounds like this is a situation where lawyers may have actually made it easier and simpler.
Yeah, except the lawyers don't think like mathematicians and engineers. So we had to come up with the algorithm, because they were like, "You guys are crazy. Why don't you just put something in there that says a third party is going to give you a valuation?" It's like, no, you don't understand startups. Startups, the valuations are, no one can really tell your valuation other than you guys. So we came up with our own algorithm. We gave it to the lawyers, and they coded it wrong. So we had to redo everything. I was used to doing contract negotiations anyway, so I ended up doing most of it, and we got frustrated with the lawyers who couldn't do it right.
So the point being, though, you had some predetermined buy-sell shareholders agreement.
Yes. We had a very detailed buy-sell agreement between us.
Yeah. And it's a really important point. We need to plan for an unplanned exit, just in case, because otherwise our spouse will end up with
otherwise, the lawyers and the courts are going to make the decisions for what's best for your business instead of you. So you need to think it through beforehand and have the paperwork in the background there. And what I recommend, even to all startups that I work with, is that they do something similar. And you can't make it personal. You have to make sure it's not personal, and that's why I call it the proverbial hit by a bus scenario. What happens? Worst case, one of you is dead or incapacitated, and you've already got a successful business. How is that going to continue on? What are your shares worth? You may have a family. You want the family to benefit from that, but you can't hurt the business at the same time. So how is that? How is that going to be dealt with? Yeah,
there's just too many
absolutely.
situations
Yep.
where that has been enacted, and
Yes.
it's ruined, more than one family's lives.
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the second business this time. You're in control with your business partner. You've started it up. You've applied the learnings from your previous life. You've got the business to a stage where you want to exit. I'm assuming that everything went smoothly at this
Yes.
stage, and you
Yes.
just created the perfect exit.
So that's the high level, and it worked out well. We dive into the details. It's never that neat. The businesses are never running smoothly, right? The economy's changing. There's good days, there's bad days, especially for startups. There's always something going wrong. But overall, it actually went extraordinarily well. The company was successful. It was generating kind of almost ridiculous levels of profits. Um, and I was actually bored. I ended up doing the same thing for more than 10 years. We had one product, it was a niche product, and it sold itself. Everybody knew who we were. There wasn't a lot of need for new features. There really weren't much in the way of competitors. So, from my point of view, and really, I'm an energy engineer, and I saw energy sustainability as the defining problem of our times. And I'm like, why am I kind of sitting here in an office selling networking equipment that kind of sells itself? Um, Either I need to expand this and kind of do something a lot more exciting out of it, or really go back to what I wanted to be the purpose of my life, which was working on energy sustainability. So I wanted to get out, and not easy for a small business to especially a tech business. If you have a consulting business, actually that's not a good example either. Some businesses are easy to sell, and some businesses, especially tech businesses, where it's very specialized, you have a very small team. Um, Most people look at it and say, call us when you're 10 times larger, and then then we'll be interested in acquiring you. But before then, it's hard. So. Um, we weren't sure there was a potential exit, but we worked with a broker. Both of us were very skeptical that they'd be able to find a someone who would be interested in acquiring the business. So we worked out a deal where we said, they wanted a fairly large retainer, and we're like, if you really believe in this, we'll pay you double your success fee, but no retainer. And we're like, yeah, we're going to sell it for you. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so that's what ended up happening. And sure enough, they were right. They found a small private equity firm that was looking to buy up small businesses and take them to the next level. And they had some background in IT, and they thought this was a great fit. So it worked out. From that point of view, it worked out great. But then, of course, I guess we'll probably get into this. There's always operational challenges. It never works out the way you want it to, or the way you expect it to.
So what were the issues with that exit? The deal's done.
So the exit was the challenges there were mostly in bringing on the new team, and I thought that would be easy because the product really did sell itself. I was responsible for sales, but I call myself the world's worst salesperson. I am not a good salesperson. I hate doing sales. I don't do a good job of it. And, I see all these salespeople, their Salesforce and their processes and their funnels. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that. And all the salespeople listening to this are like, you're a horrible salesperson. And yes, you are absolutely right. I'm a horrible salesperson. So I thought, if you brought in a real team that knew how to do sales and knew how to manage the business better, you could actually get a lot of growth out of the business. There's a lot of opportunities there that we didn't really go after. But finding the right person, since both of the founders left, and one was the head of development, and the other one was the head of the business side, was a real challenge. I thought it would be a lot easier to just bring in somebody who could run the business, hire a salesperson, and kind of who knew the industry and be better than me doing it. And it turns out, the first person we hired just wasn't the right fit. He's a great guy. and kind of knew the reseller market, but didn't know how to run a manufacturing business, which is fundamentally what we were, or a product development business. And so that didn't work out. Then we brought in the next person, but the incentives weren't aligned. The incentives from and we still had an earnout, right? So we still were invested in this. We didn't get we didn't get all the money up front, so we still owned shares in the business. We still had a large amount of the acquisition to be paid after 5 years. So and besides, this had been my life for 10 years. I knew all the customers. I knew the product. I was personally invested in it as well. So even if there's nothing on the line, I wanted the acquisition to succeed. So it was frustrating that the private equity people were like, we want this to grow very rapidly because we want this to be a huge success. So the incentives for the new CEO were tied to very high growth rates. So it was like, do great and you'll be rich, and if not, you get paid a base salary. And so what they do then, of course, then it's start swinging for the fences and strike out. So they ended up converting an IT business into what else, a blockchain company. Because that looked like, the big thing is going to be a huge hit and be acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars, and that turned out to be a complete disaster. So then that person left, and they brought in another person who righted the ship. But that took close to 3 years before we really got back to the solid footing where we were when the acquisition happened. I thought it'd be 3 months, not 3 years.
So it dragged on a bit, this one, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I meant going through three different CEOs and a lot of upset and confusion in the process that I had not expected at all.
Okay, so there's the second deal. It's and what were the key learnings from the second deal? The first one we talked about getting their shareholders aligned, and to the vision. The second one, what could you?
So a very obvious one is make sure the incentives for the new team are set properly, and if you really want to swing for the fences, then that's a risk factor that you have to accept that if you miss, you're going to strike out. And if your goal is to kind of build the business continuously, you set a different set of incentives for the new team. So that was kind of the obvious one. I guess the less obvious one is it never goes as easy as you think it's going to. Everything that seems like common sense to me, like you ought to do this and you ought to do this, new people came in and said, well, you're the world's worst salesperson. Why were you doing that? Let's do it completely differently. It turns out, I am the world's worst salesperson, but over 10 years, I had kind of figured out just by accident what worked and what didn't work. And so when they decided, that was all stupid, we're going to do it all differently, it took them a couple of years to realize, well, I tried those things, it didn't work. It was worth trying again, but they shouldn't have given up on what was working too.
Yeah, and it sounds like that may have been fast tracked if you had the right functional structure behind you guys when the deal was done. If that functional structure was all set up, ready to go. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So DC, how long ago was that second exit now?
Oh my God. It was already 5 years ago. Time is flying.
So 5 years ago, you look like a young guy still. You're classic entrepreneur.
You're missing all the gray hair in here. Yes.
Well, that's just the stress of the couple of deals. But entrepreneurs are energy people, and I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and when they're looking and they're starting to think about exiting their business, they've always got a story similar to something along the lines, well, I just want to sell the business and drink pina coladas on the beach, and that's a great vision, and they think it's going to last a while, but experience tells us that after about 3 weeks, your typical entrepreneur is going to get bored. So 5 years for you. What did that happen to you, and how did you overcome the boredom, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I actually had the opposite experience. My goal in selling the business was to be able to kind of get out of the full-time, more than full-time job that I was doing at that point, so that I could focus on what was more important to me career-wise, was energy sustainability. That was my original background. That was my passion. And my goal was to kind of build a new startup in that space. Um, that frustratingly really didn't work out the way I expected. I thought, okay, now I've got all this business experience. I know how to build a startup. I'll find a couple scientists who are building their own startups, and I'll join them as the business person, and we'll make a new startup, and I'll be the CEO of number three. Or I would join a larger company as the head of marketing, as marketing is my specialty, and kind of use my expertise there. Neither of those worked out. The big companies were like, well, you have no experience in our field, so we're not going to hire you. So that didn't work out, and I probably wouldn't have worked out well anyway, joining a larger organization after kind of being in my own for a long time. So that's probably for the best. The smaller startups were a little bit frustrating. That kind of coming in as the business person afterwards, they always looked at me as, well, you're the sales guy. We're the founders. You're the sales guy. And I'm like, no, I'm a co-founder here. And so we ended up kind of with a mismatch on, I wanted to have, especially being older and experienced, having the input in the company strategy and the product strategy and everything else. And they're like, no, you're the hired sales guy, go sell. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm the world's worst salesperson. You don't want me as the salesperson. So I ended up being like chief marketing officer for a number of smaller, startups that weren't ready for a full-time chief marketing officer. And I thought, okay, well, here's the best of both worlds, that I could work on multiple ones at the same time, kind of be a consultant, kind of work on what I know best, of being the marketing person, work with the founding teams, kind of help bring the product to market. And I thought it would be the best of both worlds, that I wouldn't have the daily responsibility that does make your hair go gray and tear it out, of trying to get orders in, and dealing with hiring employees and all that other sort of daily management stuff. To get up at 5 a.m. to deal with Europe, and then work until 11 o'clock to deal with Europe that I've been doing. Okay, I could just be the person who comes in and do the marketing. But I found that didn't work out for me, because, again, I'm used to being the person who kind of set the strategy and knew what to do. And I was working with younger people, and again, they were like, yeah, you're the hired guy here. I'm like, I don't need a job. I want to be a co-founder. And like, but this is our business. So the lack of responsibility kind of took a load off, but it also made it not a good fit for somebody who is used to shouldering the responsibility. So I kind of foundered around for a while. Like, okay, I'll do some investing, I'll do some mentoring, I'll do some roles at startups as chief marketing officer, and I'll look around for my next investment. In the meantime, I'll do some writing, which has always been a hobby of mine. And for a while, it was just killing me. Okay, I really want to be back in charge. I want to be running a business. I want to be building a startup, and everything else is just kind of the process to get me there. And I realized I wasn't going to get there. If I was going to do my own startup, I was going to have to do my own startup. And this idea of like joining a startup in process as the business guy wasn't going to work. But I'm not the product guy, so I can't really do my own startup. But I did find that everything I was doing, I was actually enjoying. And it turns out, boredom, forget about that. I am busier now than I was when I was full-time running a business. Between investing in startups with a number of groups, and mentoring startups, and doing writing in every free moment I have, and then kind of helping out on marketing in a few places, being on a few boards. My day is completely packed with meetings, and anytime I don't have, I'm busy writing. So I'm busier now than I was before. Not getting paid very much for it, but that's fine, because I was lucky with the last acquisition that money's less the issue, and it's more about kind of being involved. If any of these startups actually, hit it big, then I get some shares, and they'll do great. If not, I still feel like I'm being productive and using my skills in a broader way than just building one product.
Okay. So you've used the writing. You've mentioned that a few times.
Yeah.
Is that what's taken up a lot of your time and energy and what ignites you at the moment?
Yeah, so every free moment that I have that isn't in a meeting with startups is spent writing and then now promoting my writing. So I started off writing a novel, a mystery novel about a startup in Silicon Valley that was a lot like Theranos, doing some very sketchy things, maybe even murder, or at least hiding some dangerous side effects of their products they don't want people to know about. And so that took up a lot of time. But at the same time, I found as I was mentoring startups that they were the same questions over and over again. The people were not understanding, early stage startups were not understanding what investors wanted. They weren't understanding what needs to be in the pitch deck. Somebody gave them a template, they filled it out, but they weren't really getting the gist of it. So I end up mentoring tens to hundreds of companies over the years. And it's the same questions, the same mistakes over and over again. And I am a writer. So instead of like repeating the same thing over and over again, I started writing it down. And I started writing little articles. And I put up my own blog that nobody actually read. And I started putting the articles on Medium. And I ended up with hundreds to thousands of people reading each article. I'm like, well, this is great. Okay, so now instead of working with companies one-on-one, I can write an article, once or twice a week and get out to a broader audience. At the same time, I continue working with the startup. So that ends up taking up a lot of my time of kind of codifying the things I'm talking about in mentorship in articles. At the same time, I'm working on my fiction novels. In fact, my first one, which I finished 2 years ago, was finally published last month. And so I'm also out trying to promote that as well.
Okay, well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Oh yeah, I have. Props here. To Kill the Unicorn, my novel about Silicon Valley and startups and kind of evil startups.
So a lot of business owners and people who've exited their business tend to write, business novels. You've kind of written business fiction, if there is such a genre.
Yes. So there's plenty of books out there, how to succeed as a startup, and how to do the legal stuff, the accounting stuff, the marketing stuff, the sales stuff. There's great books already. I mean, I don't want to repeat that, but I want to tell a story. So I started writing a novel about a Silicon Valley startup that was really sketchy, but like Theranos, they were the hottest thing in Silicon Valley. And they were getting billions of dollars in venture capital, and they were going to revolutionize the whole transportation industry. But when there's $1 trillion on the line in an IPO, if you have bugs in your product, are you going to tell people about it? No, it depends on how ethical you are, but and I think most founders would. But there's a subset that would just hide it in the back room and say, we're not going to tell the world about this. It might kill the users, but overall it's still worthwhile. So let's keep that hidden.
It's pure fiction, right?
Yeah, it's pure fiction. There's elements that are based on Theranos, but Theranos was about blood testing. This is about transportation, so it's not a one-to-one. So yeah, it's not a particular company, but I really did try to make it very realistic about life in Silicon Valley, and the characters are kind of very strongly based in particular areas in Silicon Valley.
So just bring it to a close. What I've noticed is in our conversation today, DC, that your energy is really lit up when you started talking about the writing and the authoring. So as opposed to the energy when you were talking about it was a little more subdued. Not much with you, but a little more subdued when you're talking about the exits from the other business. So is that kind of the message you want to bring and share to the audience today? Is what I normally ask, what's the key message that you want people to take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, and I think that's like the perfect question here. I thought the thing that was going to be my passion, I was going to devote the rest of my life to, was energy sustainability, and I still stay involved in that as much as I possibly can. But it turns out my passion was writing, and whether that's writing about building startups or writing about fiction about Silicon Valley, that's turned out to be what's animated me. So I think the answer is yes. Now that you don't have to worry about money every day, you can work on what your passion is. But you may find out that what you thought your passion is, at least as a full-time occupation. I mean, you're passionate about golf, but really, how much golf can you play, right? Over, the next 20 years of your life. Do you really want to play 2 rounds every single day? Probably not. I think it would get boring. So it may be that what you're passionate about turns out to be something that wasn't what you thought when you were getting yourself ready for the acquisition.
So look, I think it's similar to our message from the business owners who want to go and sip pina coladas, go and play golf. After a couple of weeks, after a few weeks, the pina coladas become a bit tasteless. Golf is great. They fuel their passion with golf. But unless they're doing something meaningful, is the feedback I get, like, president of the golf club, commodore of the yacht club, and they're doing something meaningful. They're doing something that taxes them and challenges them.
Yep.
They're not really satisfied. And if they've got something that they're clear that they can move on to, that'll really help with their transition from business owner and having all of their identity wrapped up in their business and their ownership of the business, and helps them ease into the next part of life, whatever that is. And retirement's not a common word nowadays, because the generations that are leaving work now just aren't retiring. They're doing active. They may not be in paid roles, but they're in high energy, high value. They're contributing in a big way.
Yeah, and so I mean, that I think is the key, that now that I don't have to worry about where my paycheck is coming from, I can work on and still work. I mean, writing is not like, it's not like playing golf and it's like, I got a hole in one or something like that. It's sitting there with a computer all day. Work is harder work than work was, right? But it is what I'm passionate about, and I can do that without having to worry about, how am I going to make the rent and pay the bills and survive the next year.
Brilliant. Hey, look, DC, I really do appreciate you taking your time to share your story with us today, and just, I guess, your words of warning about, business owners who are preparing and getting ready. Thanks for your time. We'll put a link to your book in the show notes, because I'm sure it's a great read when we're winding down and trying to clock off from business.
Sounds great. Appreciate that. So thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed this.
Likewise.